So then you got really nervy and you stepped off on your own to become an entrepreneur. How did that feel? And what did you decide to do? How did that happen?
Well, ironically enough, because of the turnaround, Dick Rosenberg appropriately got promoted to president of the bank, which I used to call his CEO and training program, and then eventually became the CEO of the bank. And he continued to be my mentor. But I knew that his strategy going forward would be to focus on acquisitions, because in those days there were 15,000 banks in this country. We were way overbanked, as it was called. It was a very inefficient system. And it led to what, through the late 80s, early through the 90s, we saw lots of bank mergers and acquisitions. And in that scenario, the head of marketing is marketing is the tail on the dog, not the head of the dog. And that is that, you're all about cleaning up and customer retention. There are no resources to do new product development or any kind of new initiatives. It's really all about customer retention as you acquire the new banks. So with that in mind, knowing that that would be his strategy going forward, I said to him, Dick, I'm going to leave the bank. And he said, no, don't do that. He said, you can do anything you want. Go run a region, go do something, go do something else, stay with the bank. And I thought about it for a long time, and I realized, you know what? I never saw myself as a banker. That wasn't what really turned me on about the business. And so that's when I decided that I would leave to start my own business. Meanwhile, I had, virtually all the big banks in the country were calling me to try to recruit me. We got lots and lots of publicity. I personally got a lot of publicity. I was in Fortune, those to watch under 40 and, all that kind of stuff. And so I thought this is a good time to start a consulting business because, they may not hire me, but at least they'll take my calls because they know who I am. So that's what I did. So I launched my first business on that basis. And
so was that gutsy for you? I mean, kind of, there's always seems like an entrepreneur is one kind of person and a corporate being is another, and it's like, and you understand, I think more prevalently in the Washington, D.C. area, you see a lot of entrepreneurship growth because a lot of people come out of government jobs and it makes sense to begin to consult on that expertise, outside of that banking area. Right. So I always wonder, so your environment, the culture here seems to be a lot more complementary to that, to come out of that environment, although I know there's Silicon Valley and there's a lot of entrepreneurship, but to come out of the banking environment. Is that scary?
Well, I mitigated because I already had, before I even left the bank, before I submitted my resignation, I had my first big client. And that client was a global ad agency that retained me for a third my time for what the bank paid me for all my time. So it wasn't. However, I'll tell you a quick story about the negotiation on that. When they originally came to hire me, they offered me X. And X was about 2/3 of what I was making at the bank. And they were very keen. They had 4 major retail bank clients around the world. And they thought, great, they'll have me and I can consult all around the world with them. And I said to them, look, I need X plus 50% of X. And they said, are you kidding? I mean, that's like a crazy amount. They thought they were already paying me a lot of money. And I said, sorry, for you, that's, the reality is for you, that's a rounding error. For me, that's the difference between staying at the bank or leaving. And it was. I mean, that was pretty much, and the person I was negotiating with was somebody who knew me quite well because they were the head of a subsidiary agency. They were, in fact, B of A's, actually, that's a different story. But anyway, they were the head of our direct marketing agency. I had fired, when I came on board, one of the things I did is I fired the very big agency we had, Gray Advertising, and hired the small agency that was doing some small parts of our direct marketing and getting tremendous results when our big agency was getting very mediocre results. And I basically came in and, as I looked at the performances, this is still when I was on the credit card side, I said to the big agency, I said, look, you've got basically, 3 months to demonstrate that you can do better. Otherwise, I have no choice but, my job is to improve the business. I have no choice but to give the business to the other guys. And I basically put the other guys into big business by getting the B of A account. The smaller agency became a huge agency and got acquired by this global ad agency. So the guys that, I was negotiating with were the ones I had been working with. They knew me really well. I knew them really well. And I said to the head of that group, I said, look, for you, it's a rounding error. For your parent company, it's a rounding error. For me, it's the difference between staying and leaving the bank. It's that simple. And, on the spot, he said, okay, I get it. We'll do it. We'll find a way to do it.
I'm going to remember that story the next time I have to negotiate for something. It's a rounding error for you, for me. And that's really true. I mean, that really is chutzpah. But I think it's smart chutzpah. I mean, and I think a lot of times, especially women, are not the best negotiators. And I think to bring that to the table is really, really key. I think that it's an incredible story. So you leapt out and you went on your own. With this, did you bring in other clients in after this client?
Yeah. So the thing is, the truth is that originally, I had this, highfalutin idea. I was going to have this advisory firm and all these banks were going to hire me and all this. But the reality was, I didn't really know what their issues were. I didn't really know on what basis am I, what problem am I really solving? It's the first question any entrepreneur really has to answer.
Okay, I got to repeat that. We'd love to get that. So the first question you have to answer is, if you want to be a consultant, you want to be an entrepreneur, what problem are you solving?
Exactly.
If you're not solving a problem, why does anybody need you?
Exactly. What problem are you solving? Who are you solving it for? And are they willing and able to pay for the solution? And is there enough opportunity? Is the market big enough for that to happen? When I was getting into business, there was another consultant, and he came to me, and this is something, now we talk about pain points, but I had never heard that before. And he said to me, he said, who are you targeting and what's their pain? And I said, what? I said, well, we target banks. He says, no, but I mean specifically, what's their pain? And I didn't really understand that. Are they in pain? And so once I got it, once I realized I have to find the pain points, and eventually I brought a business partner in, we used to, when we would talk with people saying, we'd be at a conference or whatever, and we'd, in the conversation, hear about some issue, and we'd look at each other and go, they're in pain, and we'd know that was an opportunity that we could go after. But initially, what came about is that, so I was making, I did have a few smaller contracts, but not as big as this one. But I had one of my former colleagues from Visa, so I was had been on the Visa Marketing Advisory Committee as head of marketing for B of A, because we were the largest Visa card issuers in the country. And she came to me and she said, Shelley, she said, we've done some research and we found out that our member banks, the top issues are bankruptcies and customer retention. I know you don't do bankruptcies, but can you do anything? Can you help us out with customer retention? It's something you can do. Well, P.S., when I had been in American Express in Canada, we had the highest customer attrition rates of any American Express unit in the world. And we, that was our top priority. We had an all hands on board kind of a program where within about a 6-month period, we cut in half the customer attrition rate. And we'd done all these things. And then I led a global task force at American Express, on customer retention. So this is actually a topic that I knew a lot about. But at that point, I was personally already too busy to be doing that. So I had a former employee from B of A come to network with me. She had already left the bank. And she said, she was networking, she said, could you connect me up with this, that, or the other? And I said, well, why don't you come work with me? And I said, I have this great opportunity. Visa's just come to us. They want us to do something. Because she said, oh, well, I don't know anything about customer retention. I said, don't you worry, I know everything about customer retention. I said, and I've still got the books, so, and all the plans and things. So we basically built out a customer retention practice around it. In those days, Bain & Company was doing a lot of work on analyzing customer retention issues and, talking about going to root causes and stuff like that. But they hadn't done much on developing the strategies and tactics around what do you do about it once you've analyzed and figured out what your problem is and where it's coming from. We hired Bain to build on their analytics because they were getting a huge amount of exposure on it, to do the analytics for us. And then we did all the strategy and tactical things. We went to Visa and said, we're going to bring Bain as a partner here to do that. And then Bain tried to steal the business from us at Visa afterwards, I found out. But the woman who had hired us in the first place knew me and said, that's not happening.
Did you go back and confront them?
I did.
What
I had no choice. And at that point, I said, I came to you, I said, every other consulting firm around is stealing your stuff and calling it theirs. I said, we did the right thing by coming to you, hiring you, and paying you for what's your intellectual property. I said, I can't believe that you guys would do this. How dare you? And but at that point, we were beyond the analytics work, and we were really all about strategies and tactics. Visa had hired us to go all over the country on their behalf, hold seminars, whatever, and then those banks in turn hired us. So we became known first and foremost as really experts on customer retention, and so that was the problem. So voila, big problem, major problem to solve. solutions that we had, across the board. And then once we would get into a bank and start working with them, then it became easier to start working on other things within that bank. Plus, then we, would be speaking at conferences and so forth, and we started getting hired by the cell companies and cable companies and other things for customer retention, because they also have those issues, and it's very much of a transferable skill, if you will, or transferable program. To go across that. So that was our first main, thing that we got known for, and then we built out from that.
So I want to kind of jump forward to where we are today, because it's such a fascinating story. So you come to Washington, D.C., and you land here, and you don't have a job. I mean, you kind of...
I was in my last of 6 companies, and I sold it about a year after I got here. That was the company that, with my sister-in-law, now sister-in-law, my former business partner, and then Hillary Clinton declared for president.
So, and that was something, and you'd never really been a political
Not at all.
being.
I've not done ever anything.
What
I've done a
was it
lot of
about
community
that?
work.
What was it about her declaring that was of interest to you?
First of all, I'd gotten to know, watched her as we all had over the years, and this incredibly intelligent, competent, amazing leader who is now going to be president. Now, I came, I was in college during Women's Lib Days, so this was at the heart, I just related to her in every possible way.
First woman running for president.
Exactly. First woman, but also a woman who's an extraordinary leader. We had another woman who was running for vice president, you recall, shortly thereafter, and I wouldn't say I could ever, politics aside, the fact that she was a Republican and, a conservative Republican, that aside, I certainly could not have seen somebody like her, be in that same position. But Hillary Clinton was a fantastic leader. I always like to say some leaders are born women, and Hillary Clinton is one of those. And it's not just that, she's a woman leader. She's a great leader, period.
So you became a volunteer.
So I volunteered to work on her campaign. I introduced myself to Mid-Atlantic Finance Director at an event that happened a couple of weeks here after Hillary declared. And told her about my background, said, look, I've been a corporate executive, serial entrepreneur. I just sold my last business. I have time on my hands. How can I help? And she put me on the finance council, and I didn't really know what that meant. But
what did it mean?
Well, it meant that you're in a group that's being asked to raise a lot of money, basically. And so the exciting thing was I got in right away with people who are very close to Hillary, Harold Icky, Capricia Marshall, Milan Verveer, all those people who were working very hard on her campaign. And I, had done fundraising for nonprofits and others that I've been on the boards of, but never done anything political. So I didn't really know what I could do. I was relatively new to Washington, so my networks here were still nascent. But started reaching out to people and ended up raising a lot more money than I imagined. And of course, reached out to my friends back in the Bay Area, in New York, and other places, and ended up raising a lot more money than I ever imagined.
What did you think about working in politics? What was that like for you? Did you like it? Was it exciting? Was it?
It was exciting, and it was exciting to the degree that I considered. First of all, it was exciting to support her and what she stood for, and it was exciting to represent, like I said, the things that Hillary stands for, which all of which I believe in. Empowering women, something I had worked a lot on throughout my career. I was president of the Financial Women's Association. I'd done a lot of work in the community and other things, around those same issues.
And the reason we wanted to bring this up was because when she did not win, she ended up working at the State Department, and this created a unique opportunity for you, which brought in all of your expertise, your entrepreneurial expertise, your commitment and drive towards focusing on women, talking about things on a global level. So let's talk a little bit about what happened then, so we make sure we get this covered. So you ended up working for Hillary, but not working directly for Hillary.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that, and because I always thought when you work at the State Department, you've got to pass that very onerous test, and you're on track. But they also have, which I've recently learned, we actually hire American citizens to be, I would say, global diplomats, but not necessarily a diplomat, but to represent United States interest. So how did this come about? Because I think it's fascinating. You got to work at the State Department.
Well, it all trails back to the campaign. So one of the women I'd gotten to know during that campaign had come to become the special representative for commercial and business affairs, Lorraine Harrington, and ran into Lorraine at Dianne Feinstein's house, actually at another fundraiser for Kirsten Gillibrand. And she had just come to DC. She had just moved here a week earlier. And I said, well, welcome to Washington. How can I help you? Whatever. We got together for dinner. And during that time, she said, we're going to be launching an entrepreneurship initiative. And at that point, I was, among other things, I was chairing a nonprofit that was one of the leading catalyzers of growth for women-owned businesses here in the U.S. called Count Me In. And she said, would you consider coming to the State Department to do a women's entrepreneurship initiative? I said, yeah, absolutely. I thought, you know, what a great opportunity under Hillary Clinton to promote women's entrepreneurship globally. That would be phenomenal. And you know, take, again, all the lessons learned from all of these different aspects to the State Department. So that's how it happened. So they, you know, offered me the opportunity to launch a women's entrepreneurship initiative. We called it the Global Women's Business Initiative. I did that for 18 months, and we launched major initiatives in sub-Saharan Africa with 41 countries, in Latin America, and then in the Asia Pacific, as well as a smaller program in Israel for both Jewish and Arab Israeli women, because of course, having, you know, doing a lot of work in the Middle East, I felt like, you know, we need to do, you know, not take for granted that though Israel is a startup nation, that the women, as it turned out, and I did a lot of research on it before I proposed this, were not getting their fair shake. There were amazing women innovators in Israel who were not getting access to the networks, the financing, whatever. So we did an 18-month initiative that really made a big difference.
So has the State Department ever taken on this kind of initiative before, this entrepreneurial bent and focused on women and these kinds of things?
The focus on women clearly was something that Secretary Clinton elevated in a way that had never, I'm not saying that the State Department had never done anything for women. Of course they had. There were all kinds of different initiatives that touched women, and anytime you talk about poverty alleviation or you know, so many of the things that state gets involved in, you know, global health issues, global, you know, climate change issues, those are all also issues that touch women in sometimes disproportionate ways.
You know, I think it's fascinating because if you really think about the core of how we can change the world, it really seems to focus on if you can provide opportunities for women to have opportunity. So to provide opportunity for women to care for their children and their families, it changes everything. And it's like something we almost miss, that important piece. It's like we have to have a war and we have to fight over religion and we have to fight over this. And then you go, wait a minute, the core, the simplest piece of this entire complex world is the woman.
Yeah.
And it's the woman who raised sons and daughters and want to have food and opportunity for their children.
Absolutely.
And you do that. It creates an entire, but it's not quick. It doesn't overnight. And you also go into places where cultures don't believe that women should have opportunity. So standing where you are now, how impactful do you think that was? And what is the potential of it carrying on going forward?
Well, all of those programs, literally every single one, you know, the Africa, Latin America, and Asia Pacific ones are all programs that have continued to be funded by the State Department. And the AWEP, the Africa Women's Entrepreneurship Program, is sort of an iconic program. When Hillary Clinton left the State Department and gave her first public speech at the Vital Voices annual awards event, she talked about 2 programs from the State Department, and one of them was AWEP. So I was really proud of that. It's had phenomenal in so many ways that you know, we probably don't have time to discuss. But I was really proud, and I learned a lot about how the State Department has impact. So the State Department, you know, at first can be, you know, in many ways, certainly to an entrepreneur, a very frustrating place in terms of trying to get things done. On the other side is the State Department's capability to convene, connect, and catalyze other agents and other players, and we worked a lot through public-private partnerships, and that was really how we leveraged a lot of the opportunities and the possibilities for, you know, all over the world. And after 18 months of doing that, I got asked to take over the Global Entrepreneurship Program, which at that point was about a 2-year-old program, but it had only been in about 2.5 countries at the time I took it over. It was about to be launched in Turkey, and it was already in Egypt and Indonesia. And I looked at that and I thought, oh my goodness, global entrepreneurship, you know, entrepreneurship is a global phenomenon. If we keep doing this 1 a year thing, you know, this is never going to be a global business. We totally have to change this. So we launched what we call GEP 2.0. And by the time I left 18 months later, I left the State Department in April, we were in almost 150 countries doing massively different things than had been done prior to that in order to, you know, to scale it and to institutionalize it really at state. And it is a very big deal. And then when I left, they converted my position to a Foreign Service Officer position, which is the other measure of how dedicated, how committed is the State Department to entrepreneurship. And that is, I think that was a measure of that.
Interesting, interesting. So I want to jump forward because I know we obviously could talk to you 20 more hours, but I want to make sure that we cover those things. So today you are now, among other things, you're an advisor and a consultant to firms on entrepreneurship, and the focus you bring and the people you're connected to are amazing. I know that firsthand. But I want to ask you, you're doing something really interesting, and because I don't understand politics, because we are a nonpartisan anything, we don't do politics, we talk about lives and business, but you are heading up the Get Ready for Hillary Pact, which is explain what a pact is and how that works, and has this ever happened before when somebody hasn't even declared for an office that people are beginning to drive, I believe it has, but to begin to drive support to declare interest in running. So, and what does your job mean? I mean, what do you do?
So first of all, I'm the National Finance Co-Chair for the Ready for Hillary PAC, the Political Action Committee. We launched this PAC in April to give Hillary time to make a good decision about whether she wants to run, and bottom line, to encourage her to run, as she's considering it. And one of the things we learned in 2008 was that we didn't start early enough to build out the database and to build out the ground network of volunteers. So the Ready for Hillary PAC is a grassroots PAC that's focused entirely on doing those two things, building out her database and building out the ground network of volunteers for a campaign should she choose to run. Yesterday we announced, very exciting, that we raised over $4 million. Some of you may have seen this in the Washington Post, but yesterday we announced that we raised over $4 million since June last year in 2013. So we launched in April. By June, when we had our first FEC filing, we'd raised about $1.25 million. Obviously that grew a lot over the second half of the year when, in total yesterday we announced that we raised over $4 million. We have over 1.5 million supporters. We have almost as many people currently in our database as she had at the end of her campaign in 2008, and we're still about a year away from her announcing a decision. So we expect that list to grow, to multiply, actually.
What happens to the money if for some reason she decides not to run?
All of them.
What's the accountability there?
It's a really good question. We have capped for a PAC, the laws are that unlike campaigns, PACs are unlimited. You can give $1 million, you can give $5 million. If you have the capacity, you can give $10 million to a PAC, where you can only give $2,400 to a campaign. But we've limited ourselves to $25,000 gifts. The 98% of our gifts are under $100. And even George Soros, for those of you who know George Soros, billionaire who supports us, even he was capped at 25. He could probably do 25 million easily, but he's doing 25,000 like other top givers. And we've capped it because we're only trying to raise the money, and we're immediately funneling it into this list building initiative. I mean, remember, we started with 0 names and built it to over 1.5 million now. So there won't really be much money. We have a skeleton staff in Rosslyn, an office in Rosslyn. We have about 13 people now in Rosslyn. And we don't expect to have a lot of money left over. What we will have is a list, and we'll have a ground network of volunteers. We've partnered with Jeremy Bird and Mitch Stewart at 270 Strategies. They're the ones who built out Obama's ground game. And they're working with us. We launched on 100 campuses this fall, and we're going to be expanding our campuses. We have essentially 3 target. We have women, youth, and then we have the array of special groups, African American, Latinos, and LGBT that we're targeting around the country in all 50 states.
It was really interesting because you're very much divided. It was really interesting. I said, well, why don't you ask Hillary to come on down and have lunch with us or something? And you go, you're really,
legally,
we can,
yeah,
there's a wall.
So there's a firewall. So first of all, she's not a candidate yet, but with the possibility that she would be a candidate, we still have to observe those same legalities. And that is to have an arm's length relationship from her personally. So a PAC cannot be involved with the candidate. It's kind of ironic because you're there obviously advocating for her, but you can't actually have any direct contact with her. And in fact, a lot of my friends who are her closest advisors, like Milan Verveer and Capricia Marshall and those that we worked with at the State Department, cannot even be involved with us, even though they have personally articulated their support of what we're doing. Just because they're so close to her that it would be a little too much.
That makes sense. Okay, I want to open it up to questions now. So, Karen.
So why did you cap it at?
That's a great question. Why did you make it?
We capped it because we. Well, we expect that going forward, should she decide to run, that there will be an effort and a PAC, and in fact, Priorities USA is probably going to be that PAC that will, try to raise the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars it will take to win a presidential election. But for us, because we're, just using the money to build out to accomplish those two goals. And for us, it's been very important that we don't get ahead of her. So we're not about policy. The only policy or candidates that we've ever supported other than Hillary herself is those that she supported. So we follow her. We follow her lead. If she goes out and speaks about voting rights, then we'll put on our website and promote that Hillary spoke about voting rights, and this is what she stands for. We don't do any policy work ourselves. I mean, I get often asked when I'm talking with people, well, what's Hillary's position on X or Y or Z? If she hasn't articulated in this round a policy position on something, we certainly don't. We are a special purpose PAC, and we're a grassroots PAC. So our real purpose is twofold. I like to say, I'm sure we're going to make some new mistakes, but we certainly don't want to make the mistakes we made in 2008, and some of those mistakes were that we really didn't start early enough. And this gives her a chance to, take the time she needs. It's not likely that she'll announce a decision before midterms. I think you would understand that if she did, it would suck all the air and money out of the room, and we clearly don't want that to happen. So.
I also think it seems like it's in her best interest to wait as long as possible and let a lot of issues that are currently going on, like Benghazi and all that, sort of settle, and let the rest of the people in the world debate them before she jumps in.
Yeah, the point about her waiting till some issues settle, I think Hillary is very committed also to this, continues to be committed to this administration, seeing through a lot of its initiatives. I mean, there is this administration is going to be in place for 3 more years. This country has a lot of work to do. And that's the other thing. I don't think she wants to take away from any of the priorities and importance of the work that still needs to be done now.
Or be criticizing.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I just think it's such an interesting topic, and I just want you to know this, that our interviewing you today is no way showing any particular bias towards anybody or anything. We take a non-political anything, but it's the story of life. It's the story of business. It's the story of change. It's the story of how things happen, and the work you're doing is just so absolutely fascinating. So how much time do you spend doing this, running the PAC, or just the finance part of what you're doing?
Yeah. So the nature of the work that I'm doing is I'm reaching out to a lot of people across the country to help build our finance council. So we now have over 500 people on our finance council. What that means is that if they're members of the finance council, that means they've committed to writing or raising of $5,000, which is much lower than you'll have in the campaign. I mean, once a campaign would be launched, you'll find that if you're participating, say, as a finance council member there, it's $5,000 per event at minimum. That's usually the entry point for an event, certainly an event that she or the president would be, involved in, President Clinton. And then if you're a co-chair of the finance council, it means that you've committed to writing or raising $25,000. So we've got over 500 people across the country who have done that. I've recruited probably about 1/3 of them, but we do have other wonderful people who are working on either recruiting such people or otherwise. So
Interesting work. Interesting work. Anybody else have a question?
And that represents about half my time, since you asked me how much of my time. And the other half of my time, I continue to work on entrepreneurship initiatives, both here and around the world.
What do people want you to help them with when they have you come in and consult or advise?
When I work with organizations, like I just came back, one of my friends here, Angela Eliopoulos, who helped me prepare for my recent trip to Greece. It's where they're trying to foster an entrepreneurial ecosystem, and that's really the work we did at the State Department, is working to foster entrepreneurial ecosystems around the world, and looking, at what are the things that need to get done in those countries, helping mobilize. I usually speak, at events when I'm there and that sort of thing. So that's one area. Another area that I focus on is women's entrepreneurship and women's leadership. So I'm going to be keynoting an event at the end of this month in Sweden, in Stockholm, for a Women's Leadership Institute that is being hosted by McKinsey and Company, and came out of some work that I did with Sweden.
I keynoted an entrepreneurial event in Sweden, and they always have events in the winter. I want them to know there's a warmer season.
I've been there in the
There
summer.
is.
It wasn't that
I
much
was
warmer.
So,
It was
really, I
cold in the
was so
summertime.
cold. I pointed out to them, June's good.
Yeah.
It's very
I
cold.
want you to know that today in Stockholm it's 45 degrees. So
It's tropical there today. That is much warmer
yeah,
than it is
yeah.
here.
So we could go to Stockholm today and warm up.
So any other questions we have? That's a great question. And we always like to make sure we get it on camera. How does technology play a role in your business?
Clearly, the business wouldn't be possible without technology. And technology enables everything that I do and enables pretty much everything everyone else does. One of the interesting companies that I'm working with now is a company that builds and hosts accelerators all over the world. They're in 53 countries with 67 programs all over the world. And one of the reasons I like this company a lot compared to other companies that do similar work is that they're not just tech focused, but what you realize is even when you're working with agricultural companies, touristic companies, retail, services, whatever the industry, they're all tech enabled, right? So technology is clearly key. But I don't personally only focus on high tech, and I really appreciate organizations that are trying to build opportunities for people that are doing things besides high tech. I think high tech is terribly important, but you realize that 98% of the world's businesses are not high tech. So it's really important that the capacity, that we do capacity building around other kinds of businesses as well.
Any other questions today? I want to thank you so much for joining us. I think this has been a fascinating conversation. You can see what I mean, like we could have another 20 hours. It's like an education just talking to you. That's why I love talking with you, because we learn so much and you answer so many incredible questions we have about success, and you just inspire us. I mean, that you can go out there and do anything. So if you've got a little challenge, go look for that P&L loss line and focus on that and just see what happens. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And we
Thank
will
you.
see you next month, and we'll be interviewing Angela Fox, who is the CEO of Crystal City Bid. It's going to be a great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks again. Thank you.